In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. A reading from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12, verses 9 onwards. Besides being wise, Kohelet taught the people knowledge and weighed, scrutinized, and arranged many proverbs. Kohelet sought to find appropriate sayings and to write down true sayings with precision. The sayings of the wise are like goats, like fixed spikes are the collected sayings given by one shepherd. As to more than these, my son, be aware. Of the making of many books there is no end, and in much study there is weariness for the flesh. Let us pray. God our Father, today you have gathered us together as one family at St. Paul's Bible College to learn about the wisdom literature in the Hebrew Bible. Bless each of us present here, especially all the newcomers, the people who have joined out of their goodwill, out of their zeal for the Word of God, and out of their commitment to you and your work. Bless each of us present here, that this hour may be an hour of learning, interaction, enlightenment, that being learners of the wisdom literature, we may employ them in our day to day lives. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. Good. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Most Reverend Anthony Sami Peter Abir, our Chairman Bishop, I thank you and welcome all of you to this 11th lecture of our CCBI Know Your Bible series. Hearty welcome to all our students, St. Paul's Bible College, both online and postal students. Those who have joined new, the recent one being Ms. Imavati, and we have other students as well. And we have from guests from outside, the Zion family, Mr. Francisco and Mrs. Alva. A special welcome to you. And sisters, and we have different sisters from different congregations, and Father Alfred, Sister Unico, a guest of honor. Then we have Angeline Bindia, Mr. Aloysius Ignatius, and we have Madam Lucille Das and Mr. R.K. Sami from Malaysia. Good. Thank you for joining us from different time zones, and thank you for being part of our learning program. So for the newcomers, the methodology is very simple. The first 45 to 50 minutes, I will expose the theme on wisdom literature. Then towards the end, we'll have time for interaction. Good. Now I shall share my screen with you. I hope you are able to view my screen. Good. Very good. I have outlined the lesson as follows. Number one, we are wise. So, like how already wisdom literature plays our part, it becomes a part and parcel of our own everyday life. That is number one. Number two, there will be a general introduction to what we call as wisdom literature in the Bible. Third one, we'll talk about background to Israel wisdom because different cultures have their own wisdom literature. But how do we qualify the Israelite wisdom as special? So that would be number three. Number four, different literary forms with which wisdom is expressed in the Bible. For example, proverb or an imagery, word picture, parallelism. So why different authors choose different patterns for expressing their wisdom saying? That is number four. Then in number five, we will just have a cursory look of all the books of wisdom as far as the biblical literature is concerned. And finally, we will draw some theological significance for our own daily life. As the lesson proceeds, you could also take note. And after this lesson, this particular presentation will be shared with you all through our college group and through our email. And this also will be displayed in our college website. And this particular video is being recorded, and this will be available for future use also from our YouTube channel, St. Paul Bible College. Good. That being said, we go to number one. We are wise. When, how, and where? Like, how do we qualify the statement that we are all wise people? So look at the picture here. So we have a traffic signal with three lights, red, yellow, and green. And this more or less in all the countries in the world you go, green for stopping and yellow for being alert and green for going or moving forward. So this is a kind of a wisdom that we can say, a common wisdom. We all abide by this and we look at these traffic lights and we obey this. And irrespective of wherever we go, we are more or less able to accept this particular cultural presentation and we are able to abide by it. For example, we travel from one country to another. We don't say that in our country these lights mean this, but in this country I don't care. No. So more or less the collective consciousness is already that there are some established structures whereby we regulate our day-to-day conduct. So basically, wisdom means the regulation of our day-to-day life and day-to-day affairs. So this is one example. So coming close to that, again, another traffic sign we have here, don't meet by accident, leave space. So here we have the shoulders. So at the right side, we have the shoulders. Like we know that this particular area, we can be whatever we, there are, these are protected area and there are certain areas without shoulders. There we need to be very careful. This is another kind of wisdom saying we have adopted. The third one, in a curve, we don't travel in high speed or we don't overtake when we go through the flyovers or the bridges. So this is again a commonly accepted saying. And we have here another symbol. So there is nothing written, but only with the symbol we are not we are able to identify. The road is slippery and we need to be very careful. So in a way, wisdom is expressed through images or symbols or word pictures. So now when we observe these things, I have just taken only one field of traffic signal. And how do we observe from the wisdom literature point of view? They are all rules, be they the traffic lights or the symbols or the write-ups, they are all rules. Rules commonly agreed upon. So it's not like one person puts up a rule overnight and says that everyone has to follow. No, more or less commonly agreed upon for different generations. So not only one generation, but generation after generation, this is we have been following, even though it was agreed upon earlier. Then third one, they are taught or we are socialized into this particular wisdom literature as far as the traffic lights are concerned. When we go to learn about driving or in the schools or in different places, we have been taught about the symbols that we see across the road and we are socialized into follow them. So these wisdom sayings are in a way they are taught. And fourth one, they are relative to a place and time. For example, we said that traffic lights are common, internationally accepted. Okay. But the slippery road, that symbol may not be applicable to some places where the roads are never slippery or where there are no flyovers. The symbols concerning the flyovers may not be necessary or significant to that particular group. So that way, more or less, our day-to-day symbols of wisdom literature are relative to a place and time. Then last but one, they are learned lessons of an individual. For example, slippery road is there and how that board comes to be. Somebody has experienced an accident or something has happened in that road when that person was careless and that person out of his insight or wisdom has made known to other people that this particular road is slippery, so you be careful. So that way, one person who learns a life lesson teaches others. For example, we have teachers, we have parents. So they have lived life ahead of us. They are elder to us. And they have seen life as it has come. And they teach the children or the students how to go about. So that way, the people, the students, the children are taught into wisdom literature. As far as the traffic signs are concerned, we are also taught. The last one, they are passed on from one generation to another, except with the very rare exceptions. For example, one particular traffic rule becomes extinct, then that particular rule is removed. That is not passed on. Otherwise, more or less, we pass on our wisdom saying. So that way, wherever we go, whatever we hear contains a kind of wisdom. Nowadays, we have a lot of YouTube materials. So we have shorts or we have regularly taken videos or blogs or vlogs where people just to share with each other what they have learned in life. For example, Sigma male, what is a Sigma male? Or 10 lessons that I have learned from this particular book, or 10 lessons that I learned from a particular trip. So these people, they share their wisdom. So sometimes they may not be wise as we think, but as far as that particular person is concerned, that is a wise saying because that person has observed, evaluated, and learned a lesson. So that way, every wisdom, every saying is a wisdom saying, we can say. Because like we all, from our own point of view, we see things and we try to interpret. So that's number one. And let's take some philosophical wisdom saying. So we have from Socrates, he says, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. So this is how this is the one wisdom saying, like which means you be humble enough to know that you don't know everything. So that way, humility is kind of a way to wisdom as far as Socrates is concerned. Then we have from Plato, the greatest wealth is to live content with little. So it's a wisdom saying on contentment. So nowadays they talk about minimalism or essentialism. Like we have only little things, and with those little things, we are able to make our life. So more or less, Plato talks in a way about contentment, a kind of minimalism. Then we have from our own spiritual authors, be it Saint Ignatius or Francis de Sales, John Bosco, Ignatius of Loyola. So all these people have different sayings. So we have from Saint Ignatius of Loyola, he tells, be slow to speak, and only after having first listened quietly, so that you may understand the meaning, leanings, and wishes of those who do speak. Thus, you will better know when to speak and when to be silent. So, this is a wisdom saying because he's telling his companions or his followers that how to speak, how to listen, and when to be silent, when to talk, and how that particular moment of silence helps us understand listening and discerning. As far as the Saint Ignatius is concerned, the word he uses is discernment. So that way, different people, be it philosophers or spiritual authors, founders of religious congregations, all people have their own wisdom sayings. And even in a religious congregation, they have a constitution. Constitution is in fact the collectively coming people come together, they vote and they work, and it's a wisdom saying. People pass on from one generation to another, so that way it's collectively passed on. So whatever we look, so Constitution of our nation, written by Dr. Ambedkar and company. So it's a kind of a wisdom saying. It directs our country to go which way, not to go the other way. So this is how we, either at the individual relative level as an individual, or at a collective level as a society, or as a religious person, religious people, we have this wisdom literature. So wisdom literature is not a property of the Hebrew people, but of the entire world, we can say. And even we have wisdom sayings outside, like modern authors. For example, we have Paulo Coelho, famous novelist from The Alchemist. He starts from there. And this is one of the latest books, The Archer. He writes, when you repeat a mistake, it is not a mistake anymore. It is a decision. So this is his way of saying, like he tells that if it's repeated, it's already a made a decision. This is how wisdom sayings are found everywhere, even in modern literature. So this is how we conclude the first part. Wisdom sayings are everywhere in all cultures, religions, and languages. Maybe in the evening, we take time to understand like how in our own culture or in our own language, we have different sayings, different proverbs to mean this, to mean that, or to tell about people. So we have different ways of saying about people, saying about events, preparing for events, or we have our own cultural symbols. So these all evolved through one person's wisdom or the wisdom of the society. So that way wisdom is everywhere. It's not only the particular nation, the Hebrew nation possesses as wisdom literature. It's the first one. And in the first one, we need to be also be careful. Wisdom sayings look contradictory. Let's look at the first example here. Out of sight, out of mind. Then we have absence makes love grow fonder. So these two are wisdom sayings are of two different persons. So the first one tells out of sight, out of mind. So like suppose in a love relationship or in a friendship or in any kind of a contact, one person leaves our sight, that person leaves our mind. So this is the particular first person's observant. But the second person, what he tells, absence makes love grow fonder. So the more you are absent from the loved one, it creates fondness or it increases fondness. This is how the second person observes. So now they look contradictory. So how do we take that? Do we take that out of sight, out of mind as correct and true, or the second one as correct and true? So how do we understand? Wisdom sayings, we said earlier, they are relative. Relative means one person observes in that particular context, which means space and time, and creates a saying. So which means that particular context has to be taken and understood. So that's why. So we can say like they are not contradictory, but they are complementary. We'll come to that. So that's the first one from secular example. Second one we have from the biblical text. Look at Proverbs 16:16. It tells wisdom is better than gold, which means you need not have gold. You just have wisdom and you are valued. But coming to Ecclesiastes, we have a different saying. He tells money answers all things. He does not say wisdom answers everything. So for him, money, which means gold, answers all things. So now they are in the Bible. Both are in the wisdom literature, like because Proverbs also wisdom literature, Ecclesiastes also. So how do we take them? Because they're contradicted, obvious. Like whether to have wisdom as the best one or gold as the best. So now we need to understand they are relative. So in certain cases, wisdom is better than gold because we need wisdom to analyze, to discern, to take day-to-day action. But in ordinary circumstances, we know that we need gold. So our biblical professor, when one who taught us wisdom literature in Biblicum, he used to say, wisdom is better than gold, but if you go have gold, you can buy wisdom. You can buy a wise person with your gold or money. So that's how he was telling. Like so, in a way, so these sayings are relative, they are complementary, so they are not contradictory. From one point of view, wisdom is better. For practical reasons, money answers everything. So that way, we need to take these things together. Then the third one related to this contradictory element, contextual. So in the book of Proverbs, the author wants to uphold wisdom as the greatest. So that's why he tells wisdom as better than gold. But in the second one, Ecclesiastes, in fact, in that particular chapter, he talks about money. And even chapter 11, he talks about money and how to invest in different places. So the context is different. So according to the context, we need to understand. So we can't take out of context and say like these wisdom sayings are contradictory. So we need to be very careful when we study wisdom literature because at times the literature is very contradictory. Not only wisdom literature, even Pauline literature also. For example, we have in Paul often talks in Galatians and Romans, right? Faith alone is important. But coming to James, he tells like faith without works is dead. So now we have a confusion as Christians. How do we take it? Whether just we have faith or we have faith combined with works. So we need to be very careful. Like both are correct, but both are complementary. Like in certain cases, faith alone suffices. In certain cases, we need both, and they are also contextual because James is writing to the community which was discriminating. So for them, James is telling like it's not plain faith, but the works of charity will help each other and grow. So that way, the context also has to be taken into consideration. So for that matter, not only Bible, all the sacred scriptures have their own contradictory elements. So one way they will praise women so high, on the other hand, they will talk like women are to be this way, that way. So for that matter, all the religions, as Arundhati Rai says, that all the wisdom sayings are contradictory by essence. But how do we understand this contradictory element? They are relative, complementary, and contextual. And another thing to note is incomprehensibility of the paradox of life. So in wisdom saying, what happens really? We want to just make sense of a situation. For example, we have two persons are in a relationship and the relationship begins to hurt and you realize that one day like okay in order not to hurt continuously you say okay just we keep quiet from each other. So that's one way of saying that you are a wise person because you are not ready to hurt the other person continuously. Okay, but after a week or a month you feel like you want to talk to that person again, then our mind again justifies it. But how do we understand this relationship element? Because one moment we were so close to each other, but now we are distant from each other. So our mind tries to comprehend the reality, but we are not able to comprehend because we are very limited. Our mind is very limited. And as far as the world reality is concerned, to make sense of the entire world reality is very difficult. And to accept that, we need wisdom. And that's why the wisdom sayings are contradictory because the authors are incomprehensible to understand the reality. That's why they contradict with each other. This is how we can understand like the reality is so incomprehensible we can never ever put together in a pithy saying or a wisdom saying. So that is the limited richness of wisdom saying or wisdom literature. Good. That concludes the first section. We go to second one, wisdom literature, what and why. So in the Bible, we have wisdom books. The first one is Christian Bible. So by Christian Bible, we mean the Protestant Bible or the Bible that is read by all people. So there we have five books as wisdom literature. Book of Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs. Here Ecclesiastes is also called as Kohelet. Song of Songs also is called as Canticle of Canticles or Song of Solomon. So there are two other names. But in the Catholic Bible, we have two more, that is Wisdom of Solomon, Wisdom of Sirach. They are given as deuterocanonical books. So the first one is canonical, the second one is deuterocanonical, so which is added to the canon. And they were found only as Greek manuscripts. That's why we have taken them. And the Protestants, they don't approve of them, because for them, whatever written in Hebrew is the revealed as far as the First Testament is concerned. That's why they don't consider it is Wisdom of Solomon and Wisdom of Sirach as inspired books, but only we have in Catholic version. And we have a word Ecclesiasticus. So earlier Ecclesiastes, that is Kohelet, Sirach is Ecclesiasticus. So suppose when we have our first readings in the churches, so sometimes we'll see Ecclesiastes, sometimes we'll see Ecclesiasticus. So what is the difference? Ecclesiastes refers to Kohelet, Ecclesiasticus refers to Sirach. We'll come to that why the name came to be shortly. Then we have in the Bible some wisdom persons like Daniel. Daniel was able to interpret dreams. And even we have in the First Testament, Joseph was sold into Egypt. So he was able to become a governor from a victim, from a slave. So because all because of his wisdom. Then we have Jesus who preached Sermon on the Mount. Then in the parable also he uses wisdom people like the prudent women or virgins who took oil and the lamp. So together, so that's the prudence is a kind of a wisdom element or a wisdom virtue. And these particular women or girls possessed that. So wisdom persons are in the Bible everywhere. Then we have wisdom portions other than these seven books. Like we have in Tobit 4, we have beautiful literature there where the father instructs the younger, the son, like how to take care of mother or how to handle an affair with in a business or how to travel or how to treat a stranger. It's a very good passage to learn. So when we have time, you can read Tobit 4. Or suppose you are an elder person, you are a mother or a father, or you are a formator, a formatress, you want to instruct. So this is a good passage. It's like more or less, when we read this, already we are more or less able to see some comparison with Shakespeare. Shakespeare also in, I think, Macbeth, he instructs, like there is a kind of instruction. So more or less we will get the same pattern. Maybe Shakespeare might have been inspired by this text. Then we have wisdom text in the New Testament or the Second Testament, Sermon on the Mount. Then wisdom shadows, like Genesis 2 and 3, the story of the creation, then the fall of our first parents. Like in a way, Satan or the snake or the serpent tricks our first parents into. So they're actually like in a way of saying where our first parents' wise are folly. So it's nothing to do with the creation, but it's to do with the wisdom, because the wisdom is already foreshadowing in that particular story. So that way, wisdom is everywhere in the Bible. Good. We go to the third one, background to Israel wisdom, when, how, and where emerged. Like how at different stages this particular Israelite wisdom emerged. First one we'll understand. In Hebrew, the word Hokmah refers to wisdom. So Hokmah is a feminine word. So that way, wisdom is a feminine quality or a feminine virtue. Like we have sun, we have moon. Sun is masculine and moon is feminine. And some virtues like bravery, bravery is masculine and prudence is feminine. So in different cultural contexts, we have some qualities attributed to men, some qualities attributed to women. So that way here, the word wisdom, Hokmah, is feminine in Hebrew. It's a feminine word, but however, Hebrew literature nowhere describes any woman as a Hokmah. But it generally talks about Solomon. Solomon is a wise person. But in the end, he does not remain a wise person, we know from the story. But even in Esther or Judith, The Bible tells that they are very brave, but it does not tell that they were very wise. Like it has its own limitations, maybe. But just so that we can understand, Hokmah is a feminine word, but often it refers to masculine. It's a general, it can refer to anyone. Hokmah. Hokmah means wisdom. And it can be also read as skill. The first one is skill. For example, we have today, we talk about hard skill and soft skill. For example, driving is a hard skill because we have something tangible. We have to touch that particular steering and we have to the gear or shift and we have to do everything manually. That is hard skill. But soft skill, for example, communication, leadership, they are all soft skills. Like because we can't touch them and feel them, but it is there. So wisdom can refer to skill also. For example, I'm able to make a good speech, or I'm able to make a good piece of art, or I'm able to convince somebody and sell my product. That's a skill. So Bible or the Hokmah involves that particular skill also is wisdom. Then the next one is insight. Suppose like we have an insight into our own life, or you are writing a book. So we have different authors here in our own group. People write different places. So the writings are all insights. So insight also is a wisdom. So insight is sometimes kept within oneself, sometimes it is expressed directly, sometimes it is expressed indirectly. For example, when you write it out, you express it directly. Suppose you show it through your own life, that you do it indirectly. But sometimes you can leave it just like that because some insights, like different insights come when we travel, when we take path, or when we attend a conference, when we read the Bible. Lot of insights come, but just they disappear. Even when we sleep, lot of insights we get, but they just disappear. But insight also is a kind of wisdom. Then the last one, knowledge. Knowledge also is a kind of wisdom because knowledge, but in English it's little different. Knowledge and wisdom. So knowledge is more of like a analytical, and wisdom is more intuitive as far as the English variant is concerned. Maybe Mrs. Lucille is there, an expert in English. She may maybe tell us later how we differentiate in English. And we have intuition, more or less related to insight, understanding, more or less like knowledge. So these words are referred by Hokmah. The opposite of Hokmah in English is wisdom is folly. Like folly is anything to do with the foolishness. Any foolishness is a folly. Folly is little stronger than foolishness. Foolishness is like a in a relative. For example, suppose I have to buy a two-wheeler and I chose one model and I later realized that that was my foolishness because that foolishness refers to the particular context of buying that particular vehicle. But folly means it's a generic. Generally, I am folly. If a person of folly means like I am always an idiot. So whatever decisions I make, that will be out of my folly. That's a folly is more general than foolishness. Then coming to Greek, how it's rendered as Sophia. Sophia is Greek, and we have different words like philosophy. Philosophy is philosophia. So Sophia, love of wisdom. So one person begins to love wisdom. That's philosophy. So the Sophia is Greek. Sapientia is in Latin. So Latin in the Vulgate Bible we call Hokumas Sapientia. In Rome we have a famous university, Sapientia. This is a very good university for all subjects, arts and sciences. So it's named after this Hokmah. Good. Then how Israel develops wisdom at three stages. Number one, folk wisdom. Number two, court wisdom. Number three, theological wisdom. And how and when we'll see it shortly. Number one, folk wisdom. Folk wisdom, like a common people wisdom. So this developed before 1020 BCE, the sense before monarchy, we can remember. So the monarchy begins in fact with Saul, then later stabilized by David. Then Solomon was a wise person. So before that, whatever wisdom developed was a folk wisdom. So it's like a generic attribution of to the entire literature, folk wisdom. It's also called as popular wisdom or proverbial wisdom because the wisdom sayings are expressed through a proverb. We'll come to an example shortly. Here, intelligence plus experience. So one person is intelligent and then experience. For example, we have the example at the bottom, second line from the bottom. Go to the ant. Proverbs 6, 6 to 11. So many people see ants, like we have Newton who discovered gravitational force. So many people saw apples falling from the trees or different objects falling. But only this particular Newton, Isaac Newton, was able to sit and see like why this happened. Let's see intelligence plus experience. So many people observe the ants like we have in our own houses or in our own workplaces where wherever we go, we have ants. And this look, but all people don't observe this. They see the ants, but very few people observe. And one person has observed and made it a statement. So it tells, go to the ant and learn hard work. Because whatever be the season, the ants will be simply moving. So they don't sit idle like it's raining outside or it's sunny outside. So let's be inside. No, there is a constant movement. So that way, the person, the author wants to tell his audience that you be always on the move, which means always constantly learn. That's hard work. So that way, we are able to be wise person. So that way, in popular wisdom, person is intelligent and also he or she combines intelligence with experience. So here, careful observation of external reality. So it's not only seeing, but observing. In observing what happens, we pay attention. We pay attention to the details and you see how things are evolving. In fact, Robert Greene, the famous author on power, seduction, mastery, so he talks about this particular, like the one of the good qualities of human persons in the evolution is like we have our mind that can observe all the details. So like we can't have a panoramic view, but we can observe the details. And that made the difference in the entire evolution cycle, according to Robert Greene. So that's a kind of like how observation is a key element for all of us, all the human person. So that way we are all capable of being wise persons. And whatever persons they have observed, they have put as wisdom saying. So that way we can conclude folk wisdom as primary school of wisdom is house. So in every houses, a person is there who teaches. Maybe our grandmother, grandfather, mother, our father, uncle, or somebody who visits as an elder, or a priest, or a religious person. So all these people come with their own experiences and they are inculcating wisdom to us. So that way, our house is the primary place of wisdom. So not necessarily the church or not necessarily a worship place, but our own houses can be wisdom places because we all have intelligence to observe and make statement. And the second stage is court wisdom. This is also called as royal wisdom because it all happened in the royal court, in the king's court. So it happened somewhere between from 1020 to 587. Like 1020 is the beginning of monarchy, 587 is the Babylonian exile, like more or less the collapse of monarchy. And so that way, during the time of monarchy, that all the kings, so they had royal wisdom. And what is this? What is the meaning of royal or court wisdom? It means day-to-day affairs in the palace. So a palace is there, or a country is there, or a city is there. So they have to see to that. Like for example, we have administrative IAS or IPS, IFS. All they are day-to-day affairs of a country, of a city, or of a state. They are managing. So that way, the royal wisdom, in fact, teaches how to administer. And often, the royal wisdom, court wisdom, they take side of the king or the officials. And they also tell about good conduct in the society at the banquet at different places. For example, we have a beautiful example, Ecclesiastes 8:2. It tells, keep the king's command because of God's oath to him. So now we know that from this particular statement, keep the king's command. So this particular statement justifies whose action? Justifies, in fact, whatever king commands you obey. So at times in our own canon law or our constitution also, we always want to have that particular superior person's view. So that way, they are all written in courts. They are royal places. That's why they make sure that the authority is obeyed. So that way, court wisdom always conveys a message that king is greater or king is far superior to ordinary people. So you have to obey king or whatever decision he makes, you have to obey because that way the actions of kings are justified. So that's a purpose of royal court wisdom. So it has a lot of beautiful things to say, but also it has one limitations because it's very selfish at times. Then we have theological wisdom. That is after 587, like people return from the Babylonian exile and they sit and ask themselves, like, what happened to us really? Like, God gave us the land, Now God exiled us from the land. So what went really wrong? Then they realized that their mistake was that they asked for a king, and the kings led them into idolatry, and all these things happened. So now they realize, so it's not fear of the king that is the beginning of wisdom. Because in the royal court, they were taught like that. Fear of the king is the beginning of wisdom. So now they go back to the root and they say, it's not fear of the king, but fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So that's how they come into the third phase of realizing that everything is centered on God, theology, that is theos, God, theological wisdom. This particular wisdom also is called as scribal wisdom or Deuteronomic wisdom. Scribal means attributed by scribes, the Torah, the law givers. So it's a more or less theological wisdom goes always in line with the wisdom, the Torah, the Pentateuch. So that way it's scribal or Deuteronomic. Deuteronomic refers to the Deuteronomy. What is proposed in Deuteronomy is obedience to the law. So anything connected with obedience to the law is theological wisdom. So here, wisdom as an inward movement, because now people are in exile, they don't have temple, they don't have land, they don't have Sabbath, they don't have any visible identity like a priest. They are, but now so they begin to have a inner thing. So that's a wisdom begins as an inner movement in the third stage. God is the source of wisdom. Here they classify as two people, godly, ungodly. So earlier we said wise or wisdom and folly. Another category comes now, godly and ungodly. So if you are a godly person, already you are a wise person, according to this third school of wisdom, theological wisdom. Then the last one, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So this statement constantly comes up in the theological wisdom sayings, especially in the book of Proverbs. Good. So now we'll conclude with this slide and we'll take a little break. Good. Wisdom dimensions. So to summarize entire thing. So wisdom is a skill in many places. Skill, I said earlier, hard skill and soft skill. But skill, in fact, refers to, like, suppose I know carpentry. If I have made a table, that in fact the visible table tells something about the skill that I have carpentry. So according to the Israelite wisdom, the Hebrew people, what they say, like we say, the proof of pudding is in the eating. So which means if you have that skill, you manifest it outside. So skill made manifest is called wisdom. We can put that way. And in the book of Proverbs, we have lady wisdom, lady folly. And some people used to ask, even the feminist authors, they used to ask why lady folly and lady wisdom. I think more or less like we need not take from our gender issues from this today. Maybe it's like it's all linguistic. So lady wisdom, because hokma is a hokma, the word that is used for wisdom. That way, it's a feminine word. That's all it's a way to refer to. And another way the scholars they say is like it's a way of comparing things. So it has nothing to do with the lady means only women, only ladies. So it's kind of a word picture they call it. So this is how we interpret. Number one, from linguistic point of view. Number two, from literary point of view. That is a word picture. Then third one, it talks about lifestyle and virtuous life, especially when we read the book of Sirach. Maybe we can take them for our value education or catechetics, or when we have formation, the formation farming students are there. Constantly, if they read the book of Sirach, lot of virtues we can adopt. Especially, it talks about, in fact, Sirach. I always go back to Sirach second. It talks about vocational crisis. So, what happens like you have come for priesthood or religious life, and you are humiliated, or you have your own shortcomings, and how do you handle them? So very beautifully the author tells. So that way, these books, they in fact tell about our virtuous life day by day. For example, we have four cardinal virtues: fortitude, temperance, prudence, and justice. So these are like these particular virtues are found in the book of Sirach as well. So that way, the wisdom literature invites us to live a virtuous life. Then personification of wisdom. So we have in the Gospel of John, the word. In the beginning was the word was with God, and the word was God, the prologue, chapter 1. So the word, that is logos in Greek. So that logos, we see it is Jesus. And the logos means the wisdom is personified as a person. So even the first testament in the book of Genesis, we have the Genesis the creation story. God asks like every time, let us make. So what is that? Let us make us Why had God has to say, let us? He could have very well said, let me make. Why let us make? So in fact, wisdom is personified. So he tells his own wisdom, come, let us make. So he interacts with the wisdom. That's how in the Hebrew literature, wisdom is personified as a person. Then another thing to note is wisdom literature talks about life here and now, not life after death. Especially the major books, they don't believe in life after death. For example, Book of Ecclesiastes, Book of Job, there is no mention about life after death. They're only concerned about life here and now, which means life before death, not life after death. Only in the book of Wisdom of Solomon, we have a very beautiful, because that's a later literature, he talks about life after death. Otherwise, in the earlier literature, there is no concept called life after death. For example, Ecclesiastes is very clear. After our death, our spirit goes up, our body goes down. That's all. So no, there is no living of that nefesh, that soul lifelong. There is no concept of reincarnation, resurrection. So they are not found in wisdom literature, except in the book of Wisdom of Solomon. Then another theology is two-way theology. Two-way theology means one way, left and right, you choose one. So which means like we have in Deuteronomy, like I have set before you water and fire. You extend and take one. So which means oftentimes we think our life is predestined. Like inshallah, everything is happening according to the will of God, or something's predestined. No. So we have our own choice. That is two-way theology. The wisdom literature often tells like this is one way of wisdom, way of folly. You choose one. So that way it respects human freedom. Then last one, it does not go to covenant theology. Means because in the books of all the wisdom literature, we don't have reference to Sinai covenant, Davidic covenant, no. Abrahamic covenant, no. They always go back to creation story, because covenant in a way failed them when they went to exile in Babylonia. But creation did not fail them, because they felt that God is always their creator. Another thing, covenant, when we say, it becomes Jewish, but creation, when you say, it becomes universal. That's why wisdom literature always has this universal dimension. So it always goes back to creation theology, not covenant theology. So in number one, we talked about our day-to-day wisdom sayings, like from our wisdom, from our traffic signal, or from different philosophers, theologians, our founders of the congregation. So how we have wisdom everywhere. Then we went on to see number two, wisdom literature proper. Like what are the books they are called as wisdom literature? They form part of wisdom literature. The third one, we went on to see about the background to Israel wisdom, the three stages, that is folk wisdom, royal wisdom or court wisdom, then theological wisdom. Now we go to the fourth part, that is literary forms of wisdom, like how or when, where wisdom forms are, or how they are expressed. So we can say as different genres or different types. So the first type is poetry. So the entire book of Psalms is poetry. Song of Songs is poetry. So some wisdom authors take a wisdom element to be expressed through psalms, through poetry, and through songs. So here, why we call the book of Psalms like as wisdom literature? Because most of the psalms they talk about the Torah. So since the psalms talk about Torah, especially number 119, 19, so they talk about different elements concerning the law. So that way they are called wisdom books. And in some passages, we have 119, then Proverbs 31, acrostic hymn. What is an acrostic hymn? Acrostic hymn is like a hymn or a song written after the alphabets, like Aleph, Bet, Gimel, like A, B, C, D. So they write that way. Why they write that way? Because they want to make that a special, number one. Number two, they want that to remember generation after generation. So easily you can remember what alphabet comes next, next, next. So that way it was easy for them to write in an acrostic pattern. Good. Number two, they used imagery or word pictures. Word pictures like we have. By wisdom, a house is built. So a house, as soon as we hear the word house, a picture is created in our mind. That's why it's called a word picture. So how wisdom, a house is built, which means like a house is built with the foundation, then different pillars are there, different workers are there. It takes time, it takes water, it takes healing, or it takes curing. It takes the different stages. So that way, wisdom also is developed. So that way, with one imagery, we are able to convey an element of wisdom. Then comparison, like. So they use the word like or as. So like we have in the Sermon on the Mount, like a house built on a rock. So it is like this, not like this. So it's a kind of comparison. And some way they are pithy sayings, like hold your tongue. It's a pithy saying, like only three words, but they convey a message. In some places they use numbers, numerical sayings. In Proverbs 30, often in Proverbs we have numerical saying. Three things amaze me, and the fourth one disturbs me. So one, two, three, four. So this way people are able to easily recognize, understand, and keep in mind one, two, three. Then we have parallelism. Parallelism means in a statement, the first it has two parts or two columns. From the first part is repeated or it's contradicted, and that's why we have a parallelism. Then some types of wisdom are like prayer, like person praying to God. And in some forms, like especially in the book of Job, it's in the form of a dialogue between Job and friends. So these are the different types with which the wisdom literature comes to alive in the Bible. Good. Last but one, we go to individual books of wisdom. It's only an overview. It's only an introduction. Good. Number one, Proverbs. Proverbs is mashal in Hebrew. Mashal is actually a pithy saying, a small saying with a comparison. So they compare with one and another. This particular book has both popular wisdom and court wisdom. So popular wisdom or folk wisdom, like how ordinary people perceived life and try to make sense of it popular. Court wisdom or royal wisdom. Some sayings are court sayings as well. Then here we have influence of wisdom literature from neighbor countries, especially from Egyptian, from Babylonian. So which means people were moving from one place to another. So they were really taking things and putting into their own literature. For example, we travel from one place to another. Like so for example, salt is there, vinegar is there, or water is there. So we have many metaphors or many sayings with this because each culture uses water, every culture uses salt. So that way we are able to make sense of these elements and make our own wisdom sayings, and they influence other countries or other places. Then wisdom woman, it talks about. So it's a it tells that you follow always wisdom woman and you will be a happy person, blessed person. It always subscribes to creation theology, I said earlier. And in Proverbs 31, we have a beautiful hymn, Woman of Worth. Like it tells a lot about women. Like today we tell that women have to go for work, women have to administer houses, or in the synodal path we tell that women have to be part of parish administration. But in the book of Proverbs, it's a long way ahead. They are far ahead in telling us like how a woman was administering not only the house but the entire civil affairs, the business or the administration. So that way, like we don't say like the Bible always discriminates women. So Bible, for example, the woman of worth is an ideal woman. So some say it's an idealization of women, but even that idealization was possible because it was a common experience. So from there, they have really, in fact, worked out this beautiful hymn, Woman of Worth. And even when we read that, we can take and adapt to our own life. Like, am I having this particular quality or virtue as this particular woman has? That way, this particular book inspired. That's number one, Proverbs. Number two, Job, the famous book we have heard often about when we talk about suffering, innocent suffering, we have heard about Job. It deals with the problem of suffering and existence of God because both, 1 minute, I just turn power off. Good. So the second book, the book of Job, it deals with the problem of suffering and existence of God. Because if suffering is evil, how can a good God allow evil? So that way, problem of suffering always disturbs the principle of existence of God, and Job is trying to answer. The second problem it deals with innocent suffering. Like why the innocent people like Job who never sinned against anyone, anything, or in God, like why that person has to suffer? That is innocent suffering or suffering of the just person. And suffering, I mean, many religions, for example, in Buddhism, desire is the cause of suffering, Buddha says. And he tells that there is a solution to this. So he proposes Ashtanga Marga, the eightfold path to end suffering. But even though you follow that path strictly, still suffering is there in the world. So that way, no religion has sufficiently answered this question for problem of suffering. So no answer. So in the book of Job, after many dialogues, many monologues, and even many heat discussions with God, the book ends without offering any solution. So at the end, we never have a proper solution to this problem of suffering, because you remember earlier we said incomprehensibility of human reality. So we can never make sense of why we are suffering. So, but how we can make sense of book of Job? Number one, there is a limit for everything. We can't know why things are happening. So that our knowledge is limited, our existence is limited. Number one. Number two, wisdom begins when we know that we are limited. Third one, accept the suffering or accept suffering and accept the suffering ones. And the brothers, sorry, the friends of Job, they were not able to accept Job's suffering. The wife also was not able. So oftentimes in our own life also, we are not able to accept suffering as it is and the suffering ones. But Job challenges to do both. Then we have the structure, 42 chapters, prologue, dialogues, epilogue. Prologue is in the form of prose, dialogue in the form of poetry, epilogue again in the form of prose. It's a kind of sandwich structure. So here now we have another problem, theological problem. Like everything is given back. Job is given back everything, and his daughters are very beautiful. And whatever God took, he gives double fold. So now the question asked is like, uh, in our own life, does it happen? Because we know from our own experiences or from our own life, there are many people who die just like that. They are not given anything in return because their life is not restored. For example, somebody is robbed, or somebody is stolen, or something's burnt, and some people business collapses, and the family collapses. The loved ones disappear, or the loved ones die, and there is no giving back. So the book of Job does not guarantee that if you suffer today, tomorrow everything will be repaid. That will be a guarantee. The book of Job does not give guarantee, but it gives hope. What is the hope? That things may be restored, may not be restored, but we need to accept life as it comes. So that is a lesson we need to learn. So Job, or the story of Joseph in the First Testament, they never guarantee that after a time of suffering or disturbance, victimhood, things will be restored. No, they only give hope. They never give guarantee. Good. We go to third book, Ecclesiastes. On this book, I did my doctorate. So the book that is very close to me. Kohelet, Kahal means assembly. We know Kahal Yahweh, assembly of God. So Kahal, so in a verb form, it refers to somebody who collects, assembles the church. And after assembling, what he does, he preaches to them or he teaches them. That's why in some translations you will find as the preacher or the teacher. And another one is he assembles the sayings. The wise sayings are assembled. So that way, Kohelet can refer both to this person who is an assembler of the church or assembler of sayings. Then we have vanity of vanities, chasing the wind. So he often uses this expression, vanity of vanities. That says the he tells Kohelet, which means everything he sees and observes as vanity. Chasing of the wind, he tells that everything is a chasing of the wind. Another expression, which means you can never catch it, you can never comprehend it. And he also has a beautiful hymn, A Time for Everything. Then he uses this vanity. Vanity in Hebrew is Hebel. That in fact comes from Abel, the Cain Abel story. In Cain Abel story, what happens? Abel does good, but why God didn't save him from Cain? That's his question, which means even if you do good, God is not going to save you. What is the use of offering sacrifice? So, a very logical question he asks. So, why are you pleasing God? Because even though Abel was pleasing to God, God didn't never interfered with means before his death, or Abel could have been warned by God. So, which means he tells, even though you are a good person, if something bad has have to happen, I mean it will happen. So something had to happen, bad happened to Abel, that is a death. It happened in spite of his being good to God. So that's his conclusion. He's saying that everything is a vanity. That's why he tells, like often he talks about he everything happens by destiny, predestination. So it has a little like do we take is a Christian, it disturbs our Christian freedom anthropology, but still it has a point to say. He always talks about God not as Yahweh, only God as creator. As I said earlier, covenant theology fails, and it's a universal perspective of God is given, not Yahweh. It's a particular perspective of Judaism. Then he concludes beautifully 11:4 to 12:8. Rejoice and remember. Rejoice today and remember your creator. So I think these two are rejoicing and remembering. If these two become our own hallmarks of our own life, like I always rejoice. Rejoice means not make merry like Epicureans or people who are involved in pleasure seeking, hedonism, but something to do with I rejoice with whatever I am, whatever I have, whatever work I do. That is rejoicing. Then remember that God is there. He created me. And remember that these things will pass and you will die one day. That's 12:8. Beautifully, he concludes vanity of vanities. So these two could be learning points, rejoice and remember. And even the same passage, he talks about human life stages. So like how our life develops and ends, like we begin with like a small seed and end like just a breath. So that way it's a beautiful hymn on human life. That's the third book, Ecclesiastes. Then we have fourth book, Song of Songs. Many scholars, like they say, why at all this book should be in the entire canon, because it has no word God. So the book, only book that does not talk about God is Song of Songs. It never has any mention. So another book, Esther also, but Esther indirectly at least tells. But Song of Songs has no reference to God at all, Jewish God or gentle God. And it's a very erotic. So on account of this erotic nature, some say like it need not be in the Bible. That's a sacred. But the scholars who voted for this coming into canon, they said all the books of Bible are holy, and Song of Songs is the holiest of all, which means it talks about human love, the very core of our being. So they are canticle of canticles attributed to Solomon because he was considered a wise person. They are called, some people call them as love songs, marriage songs, and some say funeral songs. Like in a funeral, they think back about that particular husband and wife, their love, and they play back. So kind of saying. So these three could be possible: love, marriage, funeral. Then it talks about how do we interpret covenant between Yahweh and Israel in the light of Hosea, spousal love between Christ and church in the light of Ephesians, or mystical love between Christ and soul, as Teresa of Avila tells. But these are all attributed because we in a Christian reading or a Christological reading, we give this meaning. And there is no mention about God, but it tells about body. Body is something which has to be respected, and body has to be celebrated. And oftentimes today in the medical world or in the especially the medical world and the aesthetic world, they tell like aging is a sickness, so they don't want us to age. Medicine also does not want to age, and the aesthetic world also, they give this cream, that cream, this tablet, that tablet, wrinkle free face, wrinkle free skin. So all they want is not to age. But here the Song of Songs, the partners, husband and wife, the two persons who are in love, the beloved and the love, and they emerge as persons. They're not bothered about their own body. So which means body is something to be accepted. It's not to be treated as a medicine or as a sickness as we have today. So that way we have a very beautiful celebration of the theology of the body. Good. Then we have Genesis story, Adam and Eve. So when Adam sees Eve, he tells that, behold, the flesh of my flesh, the bone of my bone. So that is expansion is in the Canticle of Canticles. Some people say. Some say, as I said earlier, covenant relationship. And another thing to note is here, the lady love is seen as a worker. So the boy is a shepherd, the girl also is a shepherd, which means shepherdess, both are working. So work and love, they go together. As Sigmund Freud tells, Leben und Arbeiten, love and work. So they go together. Then number 5, Wisdom of Solomon. That's a book of eschatology. It talks about the end of the world, like in the end. So it gives in a way answer to the suffering of the just people. So it tells the just people are suffering in the world, this world. So next world, they will be happy. They will have everything. So that way, it talks about life after death, immortality of the soul. It's a Greek influence because only Greeks they talk about immortality of the soul. It tells about two people, righteous and the wicked. We have beautiful reading from Wisdom 3:1 to 6, funeral reading. So where our souls are in the hands of God. So very consoling passage for us in a funeral. The wicked will be punished here or there, usually there in the life after death. Last one, wisdom of Sirach. It's known as Ecclesiasticus because Ecclesiastes it's read in the church. No central theme, variety of topics like friendship, relationship, true worship, duties towards the poor and oppressed, health, almsgiving, table manners, death, and so on. So you name it, you have it. So that type of wisdom is it's a kind of an encyclopedia it gives Sirach. It talks about in the end praise of ancestors, which means those people had these wisdom sayings incorporated. So that way they were real wise persons. And we have left out Psalms because Psalms we handle separately because they are a big book and we often we use them. So even though it comes under wisdom literature, as far as our curriculum is concerned, it is taken as a separate book. Good. Coming to the last one, theological significance. How do we make sense? Theology of wisdom literature. Human person is the point of arrival and point of departure, which means we are important, not God or not covenant, not other world. So that way, it takes our perspective towards human person. That's a very, very good thing to remember. Then it talks about subhumans. For example, look at the ants. So that's a subhuman, but still it uses subhuman element as an example to teach a human person. So that way, it celebrates nature. Wisdom literature is beautiful. And accepting our limitations, as in the book of Job and the book of Ecclesiastes. Celebrating life here and now, rejoicing here. Creator God, not Yahweh. That way, we need not have any kind of a secluded, relativistic, fundamentalist idea of God, but we need to be open. Then universal application like suffering, love, justice, happiness, well-being. So you take any person, a child will suffer, old person will suffer, healthy person will suffer, unhealthy person will suffer, an American will suffer, African will suffer, Indian will suffer, everyone will suffer. So which means suffering is a universal character. It's not only humans, but even animals also suffer. Plants also suffer, they say. So that way, the universal elements are taken in and reflected upon in wisdom literature. Then Jesus as a wisdom teacher, we have from the Sermon on the Mount. Paul's exhortations, usually at the end of his epistle, he gives exhortation like you be this way, you be that way, wives be this way, husbands be this way. It's all part of wisdom literature. James also has wisdom sayings. Good. So that sums up our study. These are review questions which are to be answered by the students who are present here. So they need to take this for assessment. Number one, English term wisdom comes from the Hebrew word chokmah. Number two, folk wisdom is popular wisdom. Then number three, primary school of wisdom is house. Number four, goal of life, wisdom is life. Five, Kohelet was written by person unknown. Sirach, Hebrew language, was originally written but later translated. Wisdom theology, creation theology. Only book in the Old Testament that deals with the death positive, that is Wisdom of Solomon, talks about life after death. Then wisdom is the property of the whole world. Kohelet means collector. Then we have paragraph questions. Good. And for those who attend new, for example, even though you have started new as a student, you need not go to the first lesson and start. You can start from any lesson and you can send the assessment. Suppose you have completed today wisdom literature and you want to read immediately wisdom literature and you can start answering the assessment sheet in your textbook. Good. Good. That concludes my presentation.